Okay, so check this out. This was a scene of 9/11. We all remember that day and what we were doing. It stopped most Americans in their tracks, except if you were trying to flee those ill-fated buildings there. A sad day that we remember here, and the whole reason that we are talking about Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay right now is because of those attacks, and the attacks on the Pentagon and also the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. So as I mentioned at the top of this newscast, the decision to try 5 9/11 suspects in federal court in New York City is overshadowing President Obama's trip to Asia. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder explained what the U.S. is expecting to achieve with the trial.
I also want to assure the American people that we will prosecute these cases vigorously, and we will pursue the maximum punishment available. These were extraordinary crimes, and so we will seek maximum penalties. Federal rules allow us to seek the death penalty for capital offenses, and while we will review the evidence and circumstances following established protocols, I fully expect to direct prosecutors to seek the death penalty against each of the alleged 9/11 conspirators.
Okay, so in addition to the 5 9/11 accused conspirators, there are 5 other Gitmo prisoners to be tried soon, but not in a civilian court. A military tribunal will try the 5 men, including Abed al-Rahim al-Nashiri, the accused mastermind of the USS Cole attack, who is reported to be in poor health. The attack killed in 2000 17 sailors. Now, the Attorney General says because the attack was against a U.S. warship, a military tribunal is the appropriate legal venue for that attack. The decision to hold a civilian trial for the 5 9/11 suspects has sparked a fierce legal debate. So let's talk to someone who has been in both places here. Thomas Kniff has tried cases in both military and civilian courtrooms. He's a criminal defense attorney and a former JAG officer in the Army National Guard. Just reading a little bit of what you said about this already, you believe that this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a bad precedent to set for terrorists by moving this trial to a civilian court?
Absolutely. I think it's a precedent of unprecedented stupidity that I can't see any logic in other than political motives. I mean, Don, let's take a look at the message that we're sending to would-be terrorists who probably right now are plotting different ways to attack the United States. I mean, look, acts of terror are committed and they're plotted to engender fear in the population and to bring attention to these guys' radical causes. And there is no greater stage than New York City. So what we're saying is, look, if you plot or hatch or commit an act of terrorism against the United States, we're going to give you an all-expense-paid trip to New York City, including room and board, and we're going to give you the biggest stage in the international forum upon which to espouse your radical views. It makes absolutely no sense to me from either a legal standpoint, a political standpoint, or any sort of rational test that we.
So you think that this raises the profile and raises, I guess, the awareness and the media attention because it's going to be held in New York City, right?
It raises the media attention. It gives the defendants the opportunity, like we've seen in previous terrorist trials in New York City, to basically turn it into a circus. It gives them a forum. It gives them a stage. I think it's a terrible precedent, and I think it's going to incentivize other terrorists who I'm certain right now are plotting similar acts against the United States.
For the September 11th attacks, I lived in the New York City area, not in New York City. For the 1993 attack, I was in New York City and working at the assignment desk at a local station. And we all remember that huge crater that was inside of that building. But that trial with Omar Abdel Rahman, remember the blind sheikh? That was held in a federal court in New York City. So what is the difference here? Or what have we learned, or did we learn anything from that case?
Well, here's what I think the difference is. And I, too, was in New York City, and I watched the towers fall from my office window. I mean, look, you know, following the Clinton administration, one of the big criticisms when 9/11 hit was that, look, we made a mistake in treating this as a criminal act and not treating it as an act of war. Now, from a legal standpoint, there are some differences between 1993 and 2001. For one, the individuals that were tried in the 1993 attack were the ones involved in actually committing the physical crime, and they were tried here in the United States because they were here in the United States when they committed that horrendous act. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his brethren are charged with conspiring to plot the 9/11 attack from the other side of the world. They were apprehended during the course of a war on the other side of the world. Now, what sort of precedent are we sending for our soldiers and our intelligence agents who are fighting the war on terrorism? I mean, what are we going to tell them? That, look, any further terrorists that you apprehend, they're going to be tried in the context of a civilian trial. So, while you're trying to smoke these guys out of caves, we want you to be holding Miranda, warning cards and evidence vouchers, because the trial of these individuals is going to be held to the same standard that, say, a trial of an American citizen who's accused of committing a crime on our soil would be. It makes absolutely no sense.
Okay, let me ask you this, Mr. Kniff, and this is what everybody has been wondering, because we don't know what's going to come up in court, and I'm sure their treatment or mistreatment, as we said earlier, in Guantanamo Bay is going to come up, waterboarding, sleep deprivation, all of that. Eric Holder says, the Attorney General says he is confident that, he's going to get a conviction. The President echoes his statement. But what about some technicality? Is there a possibility here that one of these guys could be let go, or something could happen on a technicality here? What's the reality of that?
Well, it's hard to say without knowing exactly what evidence the government has. But look, anything's possible in a civilian trial, and it's going to be a much higher standard of proof than in the military commissions, and much higher standard for as far as admitting evidence. I mean, look, the rules of evidence are a juggernaut, even for seasoned criminal defense attorneys. So if we're looking at something like, let's say, a confession, the standard for admitting a confession in a civilian trial is that it must be voluntary and that the defendant must be advised of his rights. I mean, are any of us to believe that these CIA interrogators, when they were softening up Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, were, at the same time reading him his Miranda rights and telling him that he had a right to remain silent and to have an attorney present? We know that didn't happen. So that's going to create a serious evidentiary roadblock as far as getting in confessions. Chain of custody. CIA operatives aren't trained in the chain of custody because generally the cases they handle aren't brought into civilian court. But in this case, any evidence, computers, so forth, that are going to be introduced at these trials, you're going to have to establish who possessed the evidence, how it was obtained, whether it was obtained within the realm of the federal rules of evidence.
So basically what you're saying, this is a risk, and we'll have to see, once there is a sentencing and the trial is over, whether it was a risk worth taking. Okay, thank you very much, Thomas Kniff. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, sir.
All right.